He's John Timpane.
And he's Don Rooney.
And this is
The Musical Innertube.
Now, you may ask, why is this podcast called The Musical Innertube?
And we may reply, because that's its name, of course.
Now, how did this podcast get that name?
Back in college, we hosted a radio show. Once, we tried to introduce a soothing musical interlude.
Instead, we messed up and wound up introducing a soothing musical innertube, and the name stuck.
So here we are, hundreds of years later, still talking
to interesting people about their interesting lives.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
A few weeks ago, I drove about 20 minutes from my home to a wonderfully restored old theater to experience something I haven't seen in, well, to be honest, I don't think I've ever seen it. But I always wanted to. A real magic show up on a stage in front of an audience with all ages, moms, dads, kids, and half a dozen magicians performing patter and sleight of hand in front of them. The show was put on by a group of magicians called the Artificial Wizards. They've gathered together to perform magic shows in places like these restored theaters in South Central Pennsylvania. In fact, they have another one coming up this November. And today we're talking with two of those magicians, Vincent the Vaudevillian. Vince is an old friend who sports a rather elaborate display of handlebar mustache and beard. And Kyle Purnell. Kyle, who's been practicing magic for 15 years. And yes, Kyle even once appeared on Penn & Teller's Fool Us. So, Vince and Kyle, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming by.
Good to have you guys.
Good to be here. Glad to be here, Don.
Let's start out with either one of you talking about the Artificial Wizards. How did this group of magicians come about to gather together to join forces, so to speak?
Vince, go ahead. Well, I'll take the blame for the name because I threw that out there knowing full well that we would clearly have to come up with something better than the Artificial Wizards. And then we didn't. So that's how the name came about. It's grown on me quite a bit.
I love the name, to be honest with you.
It tells a lot.
I love the notion of a large group. We think of magic as something one guy does with one top hat and so forth and so on. Can you talk about the concept of a group of magicians?
How dare you? It's definitely been done before. In fact, Vince and I, prior to this, did a little brief stint doing something called a wizard battle, where we would kind of fight with each other on stage with different routines and trying to get the upper hand on the other person. That was kind of the narrative with that show. But outside of that, there's the group called the Illusionists that tour around. I think there's also one called the Magicians too. Vince, correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe there is. And I think the Illusionists also have like a steampunk version that I think it's like 1902 or something like that. My apologies to the Illusionists. I forgot to double check your name.
There's also a group of a small group of contestants who were on Penn & Teller Fool Us that are now doing a touring show called The Foolers. And so while doing a group magic show is certainly has been done before, I think what's interesting about what we do is we didn't come together to do a show. We came together because we're friends, and we get together. We do retreats sometimes. We get together at people's houses, and we just we genuinely like each other. And so it's camaraderie first and show second here.
And it's nice when you have like-minded people, at least people whose perspective you understand, to sort of bounce ideas off of, show them the latest thing you're working on, ask them, does this have, the phrase we'll throw around a lot is like, does this have any legs? Can it go anywhere? And when they give me the answer one way or the other, I trust them enough that I won't get mad about it. So that's one advantage to having a group.
So this kind of dispels the idea that magicians are always, keeping what they do secret from one another. You guys talk about tricks and things that you're trying to work on all the time, and maybe give each other pointers, that sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. There's I guess the best way to say it is there's an unwritten rule, right? So like you just have to gauge a magician. Now we don't have to gauge each other because we've known each other for years now, right? Like not just Vince and I, but everybody in the group. But so like when you go to a convention, right? you just kind of have to get a feel for how experienced and how serious somebody is from about the art and craft of magic, and then it's not really like a cardinal sin as much as somebody might think of to discuss methodology. Penn from Penn and Teller says, and that's like the third name check for Penn so far. We're like 5 minutes in, but he says that not revealing a secret, not revealing a secret is not a moral rule, but it's an aesthetic rule. So it's not morally or ethically wrong to tell your spectators how to do it, but you probably wouldn't want to, because that totally changes the dynamic of the relationship, and so just aesthetically, it makes sense to probably not tell the inner workings of what you're doing, but you're not going to get arrested by the magic police.
And I guess Penn is a good name to check off, because he seems to be the front man for magic nowadays. He's the guy that's all over the
certainly
place.
One of them, yeah.
I mean, he sort of blasted open the entire industry. He and, Penn and Teller did. They did such different things. And they also were so funny, verbally funny, too. I remember when they were the Asparagus Valley folks back in the mid-'70s, just getting started.
Good memory on you.
I didn't know they were going to be Penn and Teller, right? I don't
think they knew.
No, because originally there were three of them.
Yes,
exactly.
That's right. And there were three on the stage. This was during an arts weekend in San Francisco, and I happened to see them, and they were doing some things that have stayed in their repertoire. For example, the Peking snow duck business, if you know this, and so they were also about telling stories. There was so much on that stage I had not seen before, at least not in that sort of crazy, almost aggressive fashion that they do things.
They were very much ostracized by the magic community when they came to prominence, because they were famously turned down by the Magic Circle, the prestigious group in England, and it's not because they weren't good enough, but it's because at least one of their pieces, I believe they have a few, was the see-through cups and balls. And so they were basically, and I'm sure you know, you've seen that before, John. And they were in essence revealing how this trick works. And I know for me, and Vince, I don't know how you feel about this. I'd be curious to hear you. When I was first getting into magic, I'm like, oh, well, that's like the one rule you don't reveal how it works, right? And then it took me years to realize kind of the genius of it, which is that if you're relying on you being the magician and someone being the spectator, and the only difference between you guys is the fact that you know a secret and they don't, that's nothing. There's not much value there. So they're basically saying, we're still magicians. We can still show you how it works, and you'll still appreciate the value that we're providing here.
For me, with Penn and Teller in particular, and the way they handle things, one of my favorites are behind the scenes sketches they used to do is where anyone listening can check out YouTube, because they actually recreated it on Fool Us for one of their end of show segments. It's where they sort of spin Teller around while he's wearing a fedora with a jacket draped over him, and they break down some of the basic moves that he does to vanish a cigarette and bring it back. And what the piece to me actually does, it shows the artistry that goes into making magic good, because they will literally use those same moves to fool you terribly, not just in that segment, but throughout what they do. In fact, Penn at one point talked about how he would inform the audience about stealing a card, and then within the next minute, use that very same move to fool the pants off them. So by them, quote, revealing secrets and information, it just made it all the more intriguing, both to the laity, I think, are now like, they even told me what to look for and they still fooled me. But as magicians, we could, see even further the sort of genius that goes into building an act like that.
Vince, what was the first time that you performed a trick and were really satisfied with it and said, hey, maybe this can lead somewhere. Maybe this can do something for me, get me going as a magician?
I laugh because I don't think there's a single piece that I ever looked at that, okay, that's done. I don't need to do anything more to that. There's always something I want to tweak. Oddly enough, with the Artificial Wizards show, I currently perform something that's been with me for almost 15 years now, that I could more or less call it's an old idea, object to impossible location, but I really wanted to break it down to find what the plot of it really was. And I wasn't satisfied with like, oh, it's gone and now it's here, which I feel too many kind of settle for with their performance. So I wanted to craft something where there was a legitimate sense of urgency. So I settled on the audience giving me their money and trying to play a game with them that goes horribly wrong. So I think of everything I do, I think I'm probably most proud of that, if only because it most fit the vision I had in my head and got the most genuine reaction from the crowds that have seen it.
Right. It really is a great piece, Vince, because because he used to say like chaos ensues, but like the person I believe really truly believes that that their bill is gone and that you somehow lost control, but there's still a glimmer of hope that they have that you're still in control and you are as good as they hope you are.
And I like it in parts, like you said, because there's that belief that something has gone wrong, but they still cling to hope. And the best part is the way it's structured is that they believe that they have somehow failed, albeit briefly. I try not to leave them in that space for too long. I don't want to be cruel about it. I just want to give them that sort of sense of, oh no, and then that
yes.
moment that comes later.
The audience participant are the ones that screwed up the thing for the magician.
Because I've found them, and now they've become a temporary artificial wizard, and now to display their power, they're going to find their money in the little game of chance. And as Kyle said, chaos ensues.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, it's not a good idea to make your spectator feel low. But as the really important thing that Vince does is he empowers them with a previous routine, so they feel on top of the world, and they can't even explain the amazing thing they just did. So now he has a little bit of wiggle room to kind of knock them down a few pegs, because now knocking down a few pegs is just the level that they started.
Exactly. And I try to generate the sense of absurdity so that, like, even as I'm saying, it's like, why would you give your money to a stranger like that? They know full well on some level that this is just too absurd for it to be real for them. So I think that gives them that extra lifeline to get through to the end with me.
And also there's this sense of rescue, isn't there? That, that they're in a pickle.
The wand comes out.
And you're the guy who helps them out of the predicament of having messed up, so they think.
Now, one of the big tenets of magic is diversion. The whole idea is to keep the patter going so that people aren't looking real carefully at what you're doing with the hands. So how much do you guys practice doing the patter, doing the showmanship that diverts people's attention from what you're actually doing?
Yeah. So I'll take this, but I know what I'm about to say is something that Vince and I have talked about in length, and we both agree on. So I'm going to kindly correct you, as in just because diversion seems like a good word, but as a magician, we don't want to operate in the framework of diversion. Because that makes it sound like a distraction. And distractions aren't super helpful because people will remember distraction, right? People will remember an effort to divert them. So what you're really doing is you are averting them. You're kind of a conductor of sorts, and you are not keeping them from what they want to look at, but you're making their attention go where you want it to go. So it would be the difference between me saying, "Hey, look, it's Ryan Reynolds," right? And you look around, and of course I would look. It's Ryan Reynolds. He's gorgeous. But but that's not what we do, right? We don't distract. Instead, I say, hey, can you lean closer to Johnny over here so he can see? Right? So everything is justified. And as I bring it forward, it doesn't seem like I'm taking his attention away from something, but it seems like I'm making his attention go towards something important for the essence of the effect to happen.
Exactly. We're taking them on a story with us, and we want to take them to where the story is. And frankly, some of the secret methodology from an audience perspective can be downright dull. So sometimes it's really easy to take them where the story of the moment is taking us.
In the last 30 years, stand-up and magic have come to the fore. There was a time when they weren't as prominent as options for entertainment.
Sure.
And now they're really, and when I say stand-up, I mean everything from comedy to monologists to jugglers. but also magic is very popular in a way it hasn't been in a generation. And I think it all rests on you guys' ability to be orchestrators, to tell a tale and to, you don't want your fingerprints to be on the corpse, but you know what I mean? You don't, as this is what you were saying, Kyles, you don't want it to appear that you're sweating too hard to orchestrate things. You want it to seem as though circumstances moving people around.
Well, yes, absolutely. While still making your spectator feel comfortable and instilling in them that they can trust that you're in charge and you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and John has a point here, and that is for both of you, and well, for all of the acts that I saw that night in Carlisle, and for a lot of magic acts, I'm assuming, comedy is a very big deal. You're almost stand-up artists while you're doing the tricks, because the whole idea is to keep people entertained.
There's Greg Wilson says Gregory Wilson's one of my favorite magicians of all time, and he says when people laugh, they go into stupid land, and you can get away with murder if you get someone to go into stupid land. And so it's a great mechanism for misdirection or guided focus, as Vince and I say.
Guided focus.
Yeah.
From a theatrical perspective, it's a release of tension when you achieve laughter. When you're relaxed, you really can't focus in on anything. And you also set them up for another nice build-up, too, which is nice.
Yeah, there you go. But the other thing, too, is that it is a night of entertainment. That people, like I said, at this theater I was at, it was whole families, moms, dads, kids, and everybody's laughing and everybody's having a good time. And, of course, everybody's astounded by the tricks. And I think that all goes together. You feel better when you laugh, but you also feel amazed when a trick is performed. And I'm one of those people that I never sit in the audience and go, how did he do that? Let me see. He moved this way and he moved. No, I'm just going to let it wash over me because it is fun and it is entertaining. And I'm here to be fooled. I'm here to be entertained by the magic. And I suppose that's the kind of audience you really want.
Sometimes it's nice, and Kyle could attest to this, to find that sort of challenging person that you're just going to leave flat. But I agree with what you're saying. And John Allen, great magician from the UK, says that the first rule is that you have to get them to care. And I definitely ascribe to that theory of things, that like regardless of entertainment, like if no one cares about what you're doing on stage, there's really no point to you being there.
And I'm no magic historian. As far as magic historians go in our group, Vince, just knows so much.
I am the trivia host.
He is the trivia host. He just, runs laps around me as far as magic history goes. So I'm not sure how it used to be. But currently, it's just I'm trying to find the best way to say this. I usually compare live performance of magic to watching a movie with special effects. And how there's this huge, and it's not even intentional, but there's this huge societal double standard where you go to the movie, like you go to a Marvel movie, right? And no one's sitting there saying, I know how you did that. That was a green screen. No one does that.
Yeah.
Right? But why do you go to the movies? You know it's not real. You know that there is a method behind it, but there's not this stigma attached to going to movies saying, oh, I'm going to go in and I'm going to try to figure out everything. No, you go to experience something that you can't experience anywhere else. That's exactly what we're doing too, just without the screen.
Gosh, that's interesting. It's fascinating. We'll return to the podcast in a puff of smoke. But first, this soothing musical interlude.
In addition to his work with the Artificial Wizards, Vincent the Vaudevillian has performed for Hershey Entertainment and Resorts, Adventures in Fun, and numerous private events. He is a two-time close-up champion and recipient of the Eddie Cleaver Award through Ring 20 of the International Brotherhood of Magicians.
After studying, practicing, creating, and performing sleight-of-hand close-up magic for nearly 20 years, Kyle Purnell has established himself as one of the East Coast's foremost strolling and tableside magicians. Many of Kyle's creations have been praised and respected by some of the best magicians in the world, including Dan White, Michael Amar, Jackie Yu, Shin Lim, and Penn and Teller themselves.
In addition to Vince and Kyle, there are 6 other magicians that make up the Artificial Wizards. To find out more about them, log on to their website, theartificialwizards.com, or check out their Facebook page, facebook.com/the.artificial.wizards.
And now, with a wave of my hand, I'll return you to the musical Innertube already in progress.
Kyle, what is the longest you've worked on to get a routine down? What is the longest you've worked on a trick to make sure it works?
That's a good question. Now, are you talking about anything in general or something original?
Something original, or I mean, something where you say, "Hey, it would be great if I could do this," and then you work at it, or maybe something where you saw somebody else do something, and you say, "I want to pull that trick," but it took a little work.
Sure. Yeah. So
you had the idea for Lightyear for about 10 years, didn't you?
You know what? Weirdly enough, no. I was going to bring up Lightyear because that felt the longest, which I feel like is still worth mentioning. And funny enough, it was not the longest. I don't even know what the longest one is.
What is Lightyear? Tell us about that.
Lightyear is the piece that I did on Penn and Teller, but it's also the piece that I did at the show with the glasses frame and the cards with the holes in them.
Oh yeah,
and they went together. So that's an original piece. And while it might not have been the longest, it was. I guess it's the same thing as talking about population versus population density, right? It definitely wasn't the like one of the earlier ideas, but when I did get this idea, it's the only thing I could think about, and I would think about it intensely every day for 8 months, and without exposure, you saw the routine, Don. So basically, just concept wise, my idea was, how cool would it be to have a freely thought of number appear when you stack up cards with different patterns of holes in them, and then the only holes that go through are the ones that make the number that they're just merely thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
So the method behind this, I'm not going to go into detail, but the method is there's a system that you can make any number with those 8 cards. And in my head, it was actually pretty quick that I was able to figure out broad scope what the system would be. But getting it from here to a physical object was very difficult because just punching holes in the hole punch is fine, but then I couldn't punch the holes in the middle of the card because a hole punch only goes so far.
Yeah.
Right? And then I tried to do it again, but this time the holes were too big, and I realized that I either need to have a smaller hole punch or a bigger card, and then I ended up buying a leather punch kit and went through by hand, and I went and I did it again, but this time when I went through every single. So I punched a 1, then I did the necessary system that I needed to, and then I punched a 2, and then I punched a 3, And then when I went back to check, now the one, it looks all wonky. It doesn't look like a one anymore because I punched extra holes. I shouldn't have done there. And it was wildly frustrating. So then I ended up getting graph paper and I plotted the coordinates of where each hole had to go. And that was the thing that helped and it worked.
If you had to add up the man hours you put into that, just ballpark it, what do you think that took?
The man hours were more than anything else. I mean, I don't know. Ballparking, definitely hundreds just for that one effect. And
it's maddening what it takes sometimes to find the perfect detail for an effect. I have a story about envelopes sometime, but this is about Kyle.
Yeah. And then you solve a problem, and then it comes up with another one, because then I was like, okay, so I got my system, but all these cards, even though they have different patterns, they all look the same. How do I know which one is where, and how do I reset it, and how do I make sure that they're not in the wrong order or accidentally flipped because they look the same on both sides, right? And how do you solve that problem without making it obvious that you are marking it and orienting it, right? So all those things go into it. So while that wasn't, like I said, not the longest time, but definitely probably the most man hours.
Every magic creation goes through a phase of, I've got it. Wait, I've got it. No, wait. That is key an example.
Do you ever, you mentioned the fact that sometimes when the six of you get together, there's shop talk about different things that you're doing. Do you ever crowdsource a solution?
Oh yeah,
absolutely,
all the time.
Yeah. Do you ever say, what I'd really like to do is pull an elephant from my left shoe? Any ideas? Do you ever do that?
The crazy thing is that no matter what we say, someone has an idea to at least start on it, which is great about the crowdsourcing. The most damning thing, and it's a great thing at the same time, is when you've gone to the levels that Kyle has with his graph paper and his holes in cardboard, for your own thing, and you just go, I'm just kind of stuck, and I think the solution's this. And one of us, often it's Kyle, would just go, well, why don't you just use, some double stick tape here? And suddenly hours of your work are worthless because that clear, simple, direct line. And you're grateful for the solution, but you're just like, I spent weeks of my life on it.
You hate Kyle's guts now.
It's not a Kyle
Briefly.
thing. Because I have the same problem too. It's a how close are you to the problem, and the closer you are, the fresher you wish your brain was. So you just get a fresh third party in, and it's often solved pretty quickly.
You guys are doing with these stage shows something like you said, Kyle, is something that you've always wanted to do. It's a big magic, and you're able to do the big tricks in front of people. But most of the working magic that you guys do, I would assume, is for small groups, for parties and birthday parties and business groups and that sort of thing. Is that right? Most of it is
that's right.
Smaller groups and more sleight of hand.
For me, that's mostly what I do. And I found that in the in the dichotomy of close-up magicians versus stage magicians, each one just scares the hell out of the other one, right? Because like close-up guys are often petrified to go on stage and do what they do in front of a large audience because they don't know what plays. They don't usually have a theater background, and things like that. And then conversely, a lot of stage guys are terrified to have people inches from their hands, because that can be pretty scary, because you know that you have a lot of stuff to do in a very small frame, right? And so it's a lot. So your technique has to be perfect if you're going to be inches from people's face. So they each have their skill sets that people gravitate towards. For me, I would say I'm definitely more of a close-up guy who feels comfortable on stage, but the mileage that I've gotten over the years has mostly been close-up strolling, sleight of hand.
I've never realized that distinction, but now that I think about it, most of the magic that I've seen in my life live has been in small spaces. I think my first magician turned out to be, I didn't know this at the time, But well, Don will know, the guy who used to do balloon animals at the at Disneyland in the late 1960s, and now he's very famous.
Steve Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I love Steve Martin.
Yeah, he's actually
Probably the first magician I ever saw live was a guy who turned out to be Steve Martin, but we didn't know it because his hair was still black, but he would stand like 3 feet from you and do really surprising, wonderful things. And I think most of the time I've seen magic, it's been in tight spaces. So I love this notion of technique, that it's got to be right because, well, people are right in face.
there's a lot of stuff you can get away with on stage, but there's also a lot more factors that you don't have to consider. And, you know, there's a lot of like prop management factors and reset factors on stage, and knowing how to project and how to, use theater knowledge, in your craft there, that you don't necessarily, I mean, like it's always good to have theater knowledge, even if you're doing close up.
Absolutely.
But close up is also, I believe I come from the camp that you need a script, even if you're doing strolling magic. I don't believe you need to like write down the script, but I think you need to know exactly what you're going to say. So that way, but if you approach a group and the group is, they're very interactive, you need to know your script so well that you can go off script, interact with them, and then seamlessly go back into your script.
Which is better for you, Vince, to do it in front of a big audience, or to do the small audience with just a few people?
This may sound like a cop-out, but I like them both for very different reasons. I like the intimacy and the sort of primal feeling I get with close-up magic, because it feels the most like the origins of the arts. I'm of the school of thought that like it originated from rituals around the campfire, and with that sort of tradition of orature, that oral storytelling, it was never everyone listened to this guy. It was, we're all part of something now. And sometimes that would mean the audience repeating certain words that they know, pretending to make monster sounds, or even doing rudimentary magic to sort of enhance what's going on. So in my very weirdo academic way, when I get to perform for a group close up, I feel like I'm connecting a little bit to that past, and it's a very visceral reaction because I feel what they react to that much stronger because of the proximity and the fact that we now have done this together. In fact, when I do my stage stuff, I try to make sure that there's at least one piece where there's an audience member with me on stage, because that just enhances it, not just for me, but I feel like that then amplifies the feelings back to the audience, and we get this nice circle going.
What's so amazing about that is that you guys are really talking about going back to the origins of theater.
Absolutely.
Going back to the origins of entertaining an audience and all the magic, well, basically the psychological things we can't explain that in here when somebody gets in front of a whole bunch of people and starts doing something. You can role play, you can juggle, you can take a rabbit out of a hat, whatever you're going to do. Suddenly the audience is looking at you, and it's, the willing suspension of disbelief and wondering what's he going to do. And there's all that's, this is the origins of everything, really, everything theatrical.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final question for you guys. And I'm going to preface it with a story. When my granddaughter was 3 or 4 years old, she had one of those kits of going to the grocery store where they had the little cart and all the little food that you'd put in it. And she had a little plastic egg, and she would carry that around. She thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So one day, Grandpa's babysitting, and he takes the egg, and I rub my hand around it, and I kind of throw it over my shoulder. She's 3. She's not going to see it. It disappeared. Where was it? I reach behind me. I pull it out of her ear. She's breaking up. She thinks this is the funniest thing in the world, and she wants me to do it over and over again. So what is it about the delight of magic, the delight of fooling somebody, where even the people who are fooled are getting a great sense of wonder out of this and a great sense of entertainment?
So there's one of my favorite magicians of all time talks about this, and talks about the distinction between, at least in his mind, being fooled and being astonished. And he says, and I tend to agree. His name is Garrett Thomas. He's one of my favorite magicians, and he says that being fooled, like if you're fooled, that's not the same as being astonished. Because when you're fooled, you're wrong, right? So that means, so like on Penn and Teller Fool Us, right? That there's a magician, and I believe this is his example, right? So if a magician has a deck of cards, right, and has to go into his pocket for a Sharpie or something, but goes in with the deck hand, so the deck goes in the pocket and then comes back out with the deck, but in the other hand comes out with the Sharpie. Some impossible things start happening. Penn and Teller guess. We think that when you're in your pocket, you switched the decks of cards, right? And then they can say, no, I didn't switch the decks of cards. In that case, Penn and Teller are fooled. They were wrong. They had a guess. The guess is wrong. That doesn't mean that the trick is great. That doesn't mean that you had this visceral reaction that's, inexplicable and is going to stay with you for years. It just means you're wrong. You had a guess and you were wrong, right? It doesn't even mean that you care about the magic. Vince was talking about John Allen saying they have to care, right? It just means you had a guess and you're wrong. Garrett then talks about astonishment and how when you are astonished, astonishment is not all the, the rainbows and ponies that you think it is. Astonishment is something so inexplicable, the feeling of experiencing something so inexplicable that it's uncomfortable. You're not wrong. You have no idea. You have no idea. So he says that that's why let's say Vince is doing an unbelievable magic trick, right? And he and the card, floats out of the deck 12 inches and, does 3 somersaults and he catches it, right? That's probably not what Vince did. What Vince probably did was it rose out of the deck and he grabbed it out of the deck, which is a great trick, right? But what people will do then is they don't understand, because that's an amazing trick what Vince actually did. But what people, and this is an example, I don't even know if Vince does that trick. But what people do then is they internalize that feeling of astonishment, but it's so uncomfortable because they can't put words to it. So what do? In order to get somebody else to understand how they're feeling, they inadvertently embellish. And then they describe a trick that neither Vince nor I can actually do, right? And they embellish it to a point that it's actually not even a feasible method. Like, there's no way anything like this could happen. But in their mind, that's how they experienced it because of that astonishment. And there was that disparity between how they felt and what they could articulate with words.
So cool. So cool.
Well, this has been a fantastic chat with you guys about magic and about where you guys are going and where it's been going. Vince, if somebody wants to get a hold of one of the magicians in your group to maybe come and grace their meeting or whatever, how would they get in touch with you?
So right now, the best way is, I feel like my nephew's going to call me a boomer saying this. Go on the Facebook, and you can look up the Artificial Wizards, where we're posting some of our latest news. You can message us through there. Kelsey, Kyle's amazing wife and manager, has been fielding some calls, and I'll give a shout out to Kyle's business here. They're starting up the WoW Magic Shop. The website is now live and will be expanding. And you could also contact Kyle or any number of the wizards through there at this point. And either book us all as a group or maybe see if one of us will come to your cocktail party or any events you might have coming up, honestly.
Yeah, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Vince, but I also believe the Artificial Wizards website is up too.
It is. Our very own Rodrigo, one of our mentalists, is also an experienced programmer and computer savvy gentleman, so he put that together quite lovingly, so be sure to check that out.
Okay, Kyle Purnell and Vince the Vaudevillian, thanks very much for being with us today, and good luck in the rest of your careers. And may I say, I'm appropriately astonished.
Excellent.
Thank you both.
So glad you're not fooled.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Our lovely little podcast is available everywhere good podcasts are found. Listen on your favorite platform, and if you like what you hear, please give us a good rating.
And spread the word. Tell your friends about the Innertube and let them know they can subscribe to the podcast on our website, musicalinnertube.com.
There you can listen to all of our podcasts, see pictures and biographies of our guests, and contact us. You can even click on the microphone button in the lower right corner to leave us a voicemail.
And don't forget to leave your email address on our Talk to the Tube page so we can stay in touch.
And you can email us directly at musicalinnertube@gmail.com.
And as always, thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for our theme music.